professionals and legal practitioners can learn something out of this case so that they can take...
A mother's anguish over having watched her only daughter die during childbirth.
This doctor is killing my child just in front of me. But at that point, you are putting your daughter's life in this person who is supposed to be professional.
Her quest for justice for almost a decade and a half resulted in an unprecedented court case.
The sentence that the court imposed is 5 years imprisonment in terms of Section 2761I of the Criminal Procedure Act.
For the first time in South Africa's history, a medical doctor is sent to prison for culpable homicide in a medical negligence case. While provincial health budgets are crippled by medical negligence cases against public hospitals, the medical fraternity in the private sector warns that doctors are under siege.
It is facing severe challenges, and the profession is really being regarded as under siege.
Who determines a doctor's duty of care, and what happens when this duty is neglected? In 2005, Buyi Daweti was the mother of a toddler son and a 22-year-old film student, Pamela. Mom and daughter found themselves in the unusual situation of being pregnant at the same time. Buyi was carrying twins and Pamela was pregnant with her firstborn, a girl.
Pam came, she was staying at Joburg. She was a second-year student at AFDA. So she came in June holidays. So I referred her to the same doctor. So we were seeing Dr. van der Walt, both of us.
Buyi says there were small things that made her feel uneasy about her gynecologist's conduct.
He said, you are pregnant and it's twins. So obviously when you get those good news, we were like, wow. So we started to like, wow, twins. Immediately I thought I would be the second one to have twins in my dad's family because my uncle has 2 sets. So we've been waiting for the next one. And then he was like, don't get excited, you don't know what will happen. That's why I say signs were there. We could have left that doctor immediately after he uttered those words, that statement.
Shortly before Pamela was due to give birth, Buyi unexpectedly lost her twins during a miscarriage while being treated by Dr. van der Walt. Eventually the big day arrived and Pamela went into labour. She was admitted to this private facility in Mpumalanga, the Life Cosmos Hospital.
It was a day that was supposed to be a jubilee day where everybody would rejoice. At home, in PE, in Lisa's family, everybody was expecting, to hear the good news.
Little did Buyi know that tragedy would strike and her biggest nightmare would unfold right in front of her eyes.
This daughter was drunk, Adele, and he just took the jacket and threw on the floor. You could see that this is not a normal person. But I did request to these nurses. I said, guys, you saw that this doctor is drunk. I asked her if we can change the doctor. Then she said it was too late because Pam was already far. And if I take her now, it will be a risk.
Buyi says she had no choice but to leave the delivery in the hands of Dr. van der Walt.
Calling, where's a vacuum extractor, forceps, and the nurses had already set the table nice below Pam. And he manipulated with this vacuum extractor, and then he held Lisa's head and then stopped and then put his hand in. The way he put that hand, that arm was inside Pam, and he was like as if he was twisting a pipe. I don't know what he was twisting there. I don't know the strength I had to be in that room, But when I look at these nurses, I was like, I could see that they were also not approving what he was done. And he could see that the room was tense and nobody was approving what he was done. And he said, I'm just positioning the head.
Buyi's granddaughter Lisa survived the birth, but Pamela was bleeding from complications caused by the instruments used during the delivery. By now, Dr. van der Walt had left the hospital. He was giving medical instructions to nursing staff over the phone. Pamela Daweti died hours later.
Pam never saw Lisa. Pam never even held Lisa. You know, she never held her own child. My beautiful daughter was just lying there, beautiful as she was, numb. And this doctor left her bleeding.
Today, Pamela Daweti's daughter, Lisa, is a vibrant 14-year-old teenager with her own dreams for the future. But her birth story and that of her mother's death have always been part of her upbringing.
All I know is that while giving birth, she lost a lot of blood and she died the next day, and I was alive. And my mom, she was under a lot of stress. I feel like it was the fact that she just wanted the doctor that caused this problem to admit what he did and just for him to serve the sentence that he had.
Dr. Dani van der Walt continued working as a gynecologist and obstetrician following Pamela Daweti's death. But Buyi wanted justice for her daughter. She first reported the case to the hospital management and then to the Medical Professions Council of South Africa. She says she only heard back from them 2 years later.
I was never consulted thereafter. Instead, boom, I got a letter saying that Dr. van der Walt has paid 10,000 admission of guilt. How did the process took place without me as a complainant? How did it took place?
With medical error.
Dr. Khosi Letlape is president of the Health Professions Council of South Africa. He says in cases of poor medical outcomes, it's not unlikely to review the case on the merits of only the medical records before it.
It depends on the nature of the complaint that has been put forward. Remember, we're reliant on what the complainant puts down. And based on what you put down, we would seek an explanation from the doctor concerned. So it's totally dependent on what is it that you are complaining about. If you are complaining about the behavior of a practitioner, a matter might be looked at a prelim level and concluded at that level. If you are complaining about a clinical outcome and clinical conduct, more evidence would need to be found. But that evidence would be based on hospital and clinical records rather than on what the complainant is putting forward.
Your role is to advocate for the public. And within my journey, as much as you have failed me and you made the doctor to pay 10,000 admission of guilt, this is not for me. It is for the public. Can we correct and review the processes? The process you did with me is not working.
Professor Leon Snyman represents the South African Association for Obstetricians and Gynecologists. He says the public should know that all medical procedures involve risk.
Obstetrics in specific is a high-risk environment. Medicine in general, we work with sick patients, and death is an outcome in some cases. And it is in society's interest to have gynecologists that are willing to take on the risk of looking after pregnant ladies. Because being pregnant is a risk in itself. It doesn't matter how good you look after these patients, those risks are there.
Dissatisfied with the outcome of the Health Profession Council's case against Dr. Dani van der Walt, Boeie turned to the courts for recourse. It would take her almost a decade and a half to see the case to its finality. In this unprecedented case, Dr. van der Walt was successfully charged and convicted for culpable homicide. Adele van der Walt's medico-legal practice specializes in cases of medical neglect. She says the law provides for various and complex avenues to pursue these cases.
Perhaps I can start off by distinguishing between the three different categories with any medical adverse reaction or result. First of all, we've got the unethical, unprofessional conduct, which is the Health Professions Council dealing with such a complaint. Then you've got the civil suit, that is where somebody is instituting action to get compensation for medical negligence. And the reasonable doctor test is here relevant. And then you get the criminal part, which is where the state will then proceed with an investigation and charges with regards to any irregularities.
In this document, obstetrics expert Dr. MJ Titus notes that Dr. van der Walt failed to examine Pamela Daweti following a traumatic assisted instrumental delivery. Displayed poor judgment in that he first used a vacuum extractor and applied a forceps with disastrous outcome. Used a single blade forceps to rotate the fetal head, which the report calls a dangerous maneuver. Failed to manage a third-degree tear according to standard accepted guidelines. And that the nurses were left to battle on their own, barely keeping the patient alive, while the doctor, who should have been in charge, was giving telephonic verbal orders. The report's finding is that the patient's death was as a result of gross negligence on the part of Dr. van der Walt. Ironically, this report, one of the most damning documents that formed part of the criminal case against Dr. van der Walt, was compiled by Dr. Titus, who wrote it on behalf of the Health Professions Council, the very same body who years earlier had imposed a mere 10,000 rand fine in the same medical negligence case.
Well, the point is, the evidence led and the complaint that was put through to the court may have been totally different from the complaint put to cancer and the evidence led in cancer.
It is important then to move back in time and to see at that stage when the negligence occurred or the damages occurred, that the doctor adhered to the specific protocol in that discipline. Let's take an example with gynecology or with general surgeon, whether the doctor at that stage did what that reasonable doctor would have done. Argument's sake, you've got 10 doctors in the same discipline with those specific facts, with the patient's history. You refer to that as the pre-morbid situation of the patient, whether 8 out of 10 doctors would have followed the same steps and the end result would have been more or less the same.
The allegations that Dr. van der Walt was under the influence of alcohol on the night he treated Pamela Daweti was set aside in the court case against him. The court's findings were based solely on his medical conduct. But medical experts believe even in such cases with unfavorable outcomes, doctors should not be penalized with jail.
Yeah, we don't think it should be settled in a court. And if at the moment that is what we are facing, so and this case that we are discussing is the example of that. But even under those circumstances, we think that there are other ways of dealing with this.
If it has to be this one doctor that we need to deal with in order to ensure that South African doctors have a lesson learned because of this case, let it be.
Boeie Daweti is also an ordained pastor. She says her faith community has stood by her throughout her battle to get Dr. van der Walt's case to court.
as this went on, we prayed with her that the Lord may help her find peace and find a way in which to overcome this, because the more one is troubled by something that angers them, the more it draws them back from reaching their full potential and what is before them to do. But also find justice, because if one has been wronged and there's no acknowledgement of the wrong, there's little chance, if any, of repentance. When she went to the court hearing, we were present as a delegation. I personally was also present. And indeed, she won that matter. So in truth, there has been that victory that she has gotten after so many years of pursuing this matter.
Dr. van der Wald's family maintains he had always conducted himself in an ethical and professional manner. In a letter to Special Assignment, his wife and children write, "Our father has immense sympathy for the pain Ms. Buyiselwa Daweti and Lisa Daweti have been through. These events remain painful for our father because he believes he did everything he could to ensure her well-being and conducted himself in accordance with all the prescripts of his profession. Sadly, his dedication to his more than 40,000 patients over a 30-year career, his uncompromising professionalism in delivering more than 8,000 babies, has been lost."
This was the first time that he had been brought in front of council, and a lot of the other complaints that have come subsequently were not put to council at the time.
Their value is to fulfill its role of regulating and guide and advocate for all. This is very powerful strategy that HPCSA can utilize when there are medical cases, because the medical practitioners have it, so they can take them into account based on what they have. Because this is what HPCSA stands for. Instead, what they are doing, they cover people like Dr. van der Walt. Why is Dr. van der Walt, after 14 years that he has murdered my daughter, why is he still in the role of HPCSA?
He is still registered as a doctor. And what we found is that we're looking at reviewing our own acts, because our acts confine us to professional conduct inquiry, professional behavior, and findings in our own processes. It is deficient in that it does not speak to criminal convictions of any nature by any of the practitioners on the register. And that matter is being reviewed by the legal division as to whether we could put language to cover instances like that.
So in theory, if he comes out of jail, let's say in 3 years, he can practice again?
Yes, in theory, if he comes out of jail, in 3 years he could practice again. But since there is a conviction, we are looking at what are our obligations for a practitioner that has had a custodial sentence. That's why I'm saying we're looking at reviewing our things.
South Africa's healthcare sector has seen a staggering increase in medical negligence cases over the past decade. According to reports, medical claims against public hospitals reached an alarming 80.4 billion rand. Experts say this crisis threatens the national health budget, with too much money going towards covering legal costs.
As council, we are concerned about the fact that in South Africa, in both public and private sectors, these conditions are not conducive to ethical practice by practitioners. When you're talking of staff shortages, medication shortages, equipment shortfalls, long queues, long working hours, insufficient cover in the private sector, people's choice of practitioner being limited in the private sector, people's forms of treatment being curtailed, all these issues lead to an environment where ethical practice is challenged.
This has partly contributed to the huge increase in compensation claims against the state. Last year, submissions were made before Parliament for law reform around the State Liability Act in an effort to curb astronomical claims against the Health Department.
The Act on the state liability We know it has changed. Years ago, you could not execute against the state with a judgment, which is now possible. So all these factors play a role, and it does have a knock-on effect. My worry and concern is that in time to come, especially with gynecologists also now facing a huge risk of being imprisoned for culpable homicide, may also reconsider or limit the scope of their practice as to ensure that they limit their risks.
It is already happening that many gynecologists are stop doing the obstetrics part of it, stop doing deliveries, only looking after women's health issues in non-pregnant patients. So if we look at obstetrics in specific, there's a real threat that within the next few years, if something is not done now, that private obstetrics will cease to exist, and it will only be for the super rich.
We're concerned about the legalization of medical errors. And we are hoping that the ministry and the state will look seriously at producing a legislative framework for no-fault compensation. What we do in healthcare is not perfect. Outcomes are not guaranteed. But what we expect is professional conduct in accordance with what is expected of the profession, of the colleagues, and of the training and competencies that practitioners have. But even in that scenario, patients can still be harmed.
Today, not so long ago.
But for many like Buyi and Lisa, talks about law reform around civil claims for medical neglect cases does not bring back the mother and daughter they both lost. Buyi never sought financial compensation for the cost of taking care of her granddaughter after Pamela's death. In her mind, there was never any other option but to raise Lisa as her own child. She has since started an NGO to assist other families who are dealing with medical neglect cases. And she has written a book about her own family's ordeal. For Buyi, the fight has always been in pursuit of changing the system.
When I reflect back on the dream, I feel as if I never missed your wedding.
The entire South African legal environment is not about to forget you. They will for decades mention your name. You will be a precedent. Young scholars in the legal and medical professions will learn about you. That is my wish, Adele, that professionals and legal practitioners can learn something out of this case so that they can take our lives seriously.